A decade after the Army public school tragedy, Pakistan is still grappling with the devastating aftermath of terrorism. The failure to decisively address the root causes of extremism has allowed terrorist groups to strengthen, adapt and expand their reach. Despite public outcry and calls for justice, the government's inability to prioritize counterterrorism has left the country vulnerable. The seeds of violence sown years ago have now grown into formidable threats bearing bitter fruit. Take a look.
The morning of December 16, 2014 remains one of the darkest and most tragic days in Pakistan's history. On that day, 6 gunmen from the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan attacked the Army public school in Peshawar, mercilessly killing 149 people, including 132 children. This horrifying incident sent shockwaves through the country, leaving families, students and teachers devastated and questioning the leadership at the time. A decade later, justice remains elusive and the scars of that day continue to haunt Pakistan. As Pakistan marks the 10th anniversary of the APS attack, it's clear that the memories of this atrocity are still fresh in the minds of people across the country. Despite the immense public outcry and calls for justice, tangible action against the menace of terrorism remains inadequate. The APS attack shook the world, but the demands for justice and accountability have largely gone unanswered as terrorism continues to cast a long shadow over Pakistan.
The 2014 Army public school attacks in Peshawar remains as one of the most horrific incidents in Pakistan's history, exposing a very grim reality of what extremism brings. And this massacre, I believe, claimed lives of 140 people, mostly children, who have been targeted in this particular attack. And when I look at this issue, I believe that the main reason behind Pakistan's failure to address this root cause of extremism is the issue which lies in the decade-old policy of supporting terrorist groups for geopolitical purposes. And as Dr. Jaishankar had aptly remarked in one of the press conferences, he said that you can't keep snakes in your backyard and expect them to only bite your neighbors. So this policy, I do believe, has led to an environment in Pakistan which is conducive to the growth of such groups.
On December 16, authorities were compelled to shut down all private and public schools in Islamabad and Punjab, taking a precautionary step to avert another tragedy. This drastic measure underscores the ongoing and unresolved nature of Pakistan's battle against terrorism. The government's failure to effectively prioritize and address this issue highlights the grim reality of the country's persistent struggle with extremist violence. The roots of terrorism planted years ago have now grown into formidable threats bearing bitter fruit. Tragically, the state seems more focused on suppressing political opposition than confronting the ever-present dangers of extremism.
While Pakistan, I do believe, has also taken countermeasures and military operations such as Zarb-e-Azab to tackle TTP after there was a sharp rise in their attacks on Pakistan Army. I believe that the selective approach to terrorism and extremism of certain groups, tolerating certain groups, while on the other hand severely undermines this particular efforts. And since the inception, I believe that since Pakistan has leaned heavily on its Islamic identity, and the problem comes when this particular narrative gets intertwined with the national identity. And with the change in the government in Afghanistan as well, with Taliban coming in, I believe that this has also led to an increase in the skirmishes between the Pakistani army and the Afghan Taliban along the Durand line.
With terrorism still a constant threat and justice yet to be served, the road ahead for Pakistan remains shrouded in darkness. Until the root causes of violence are effectively addressed and meaningful action is taken, the country's future remains at risk and the spectre of another tragedy looms ever closer. Terrorist groups operating within Pakistan have only grown in strength over the years, adapting and expanding their reach. Attacks on both civilians and security forces have become frequent, as these outfits exploit the nation's political instability, weak governance, and the dangerous game of appeasement politics. They thrive in an environment where political and military priorities often conflict and security efforts are fragmented. The lack of coordinated, comprehensive strategies to dismantle these groups has fostered a sense of helplessness among the public.